Well, thank you all. Thank you all for joining us as we announce the introduction of the Iran Policy Oversight Act. I'm joined by a group of senators who painstakingly reviewed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran Nuclear Agreement, and we came to different conclusions. Some of us supported the JCPOA. Others of us opposed the JCPOA. We all recognize, all of us, supporters and opponents, that the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action is being implemented. It's going forward. So we are concentrating on tomorrow, not the past, to ensure that the agreement is enforced, that Iran is permanently prevented from obtaining a nuclear weapon. That's our objective. For Congress, participation, we think the answer is to help in that regard, the Iran Policy Oversight Act. It's fully consistent with the JCPOA. It addressed elements of concerns that have been raised by both the supporters and opponents of the agreement. Let me just give you a few examples, and my colleagues will elaborate on others. It provides a robust security assistance package for Israel to deter any conventional or nuclear threat. It provides for a regional security strategy dealing with our partners in the Gulf Cooperation Council. It maintains, and if needed, enhances our policies to counter Iran's terrorism, ballistic missile proliferation, or human rights abuses. It works with our European allies to effectively have snapback sanctions for any violations. It provides IAEA the support and resources it needs to carry out its critically important responsibilities in the JCPOA. I want to make it clear that this legislation is the cumulative product of every senator that is on this stage. Each one of my colleagues, Senator Bennet, Senator Blumenthal, Senator Wyden, Senator Coons, Senator Warner, Senator Booker, Senator Schumer, Senator Schatz, have added to this bill. There are provisions that are included as a result of their advocacy and work. When you read the legislation, you're going to see that it responds to comments made during the congressional review from congressional hearings, comments made by the administration and by public witnesses as to how we could strengthen our position in enforcing the JCPOA. It is fully consistent with comments made during the deliberations by my colleagues and letters that they received from the administration with certain concerns that they had regarding the JCPOA. And I think you will also find that it is consistent with the letter that Secretary of State Kerry sent to each member of the Congress, saying that there is a constructive role for Congress to play in the implementation of the JCPOA. We're taking a lesson from the past. We got to these negotiations because of the toughest international sanctions in which Congress led in its enactment. We displayed congressional unity in passing those sanctions, Democrats and Republicans, the Senate and the House. Today, we Democrats, opponents and supporters of the JCPOA, are taking a lesson from our past actions of unity is the way to get the best results. We were not unified in our votes, but we are unified today in our resolve to help make sure that Iran never becomes a nuclear weapon state. We have and already had conversations with our Republican colleagues. They didn't have the same, they were unified, every one. We have had very positive discussions with Republicans on many of the provisions that are included in this act, and we will continue those discussions. We've had positive conversations with the White House, and we will continue, because America speaks best when Congress and the White House works together. Iran's the culprit. Let's focus on Iran. And I think this legislation gives us that chance for the unity in order to be able to achieve the common objective of accomplishing the JCPOA's objective. That is our mission, and that's why we are together today for this legislation. Let me ask, if I might, Senator Bennet, who is one of the key architects of this legislation, to come forward.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. Well, good morning, everybody. I want to start by thanking Senator Cardin for his tremendous leadership over the last 2 months, and the rest of my colleagues that are on this stage who have all contributed a lot. As Senator Cardin mentioned, these senators represent people who supported the legislation, as the agreement with Iran, as I did, and those who didn't. And I want to explain to you why I think this legislation is so important. In 2003, Iran possessed roughly 164 centrifuges and almost no enriched uranium. 10 years later, even though we had sanctioned them, they had 19,000 centrifuges, 10 bombs worth of enriched uranium, and were 2 to 3 months away from breaking out with a nuclear weapon. During that decade, the United States of America also made the decision to invade Iraq, the most important balance to Iran in the region. The people of Colorado demand a lot more coherence out of our foreign policy than that decade reflected. And I think this legislation is going to make sure that from Congress to Congress, from administration to administration, the people's representatives here keep their eyes focused on what we need to be focused on. So I want to call your attention to 4 provisions that are particularly important to me. One is the requirement that the administration develop a regional strategy to counter conventional and asymmetric threats in the region. This looks out over a decade to say to the Congress, this is our plan for the region. We track funds that Iran receives directly and indirectly from sanctions relief, including any changes in support of proxy and terrorist groups, so we can see how they're using the money they're benefiting from. It requires routine reports on Iranian research and development and breakout times, so that we don't find ourselves in the same position we were in 2013. And finally, as Senator Cardin mentioned, it ensures that Israel can defend against nuclear and conventional threats. I look forward to continue to work with the colleagues here and other colleagues in the Senate, both Democrats and Republicans, to move this legislation to the floor and get it passed. And with that, I will turn the podium over to my colleague from Connecticut, Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you. I want to join, and I'm sure my other colleagues will join with me in thanking Senator Cardin for his leadership. It's really in the best traditions of the United States Senate to bring together colleagues of varying opinions. And certainly we disagreed not only on our vote, but also in our approach to going forward. And this bill essentially looks forward to strengthen and improve the agreement without in any way contradicting or undermining it, to provide vital oversight and vigorous enforcement of that agreement. First and crucially, the bill enshrines in statute a clear, unequivocal, emphatic policy of deterrence. Iran has no right, none, to enrich uranium beyond what is necessary for peaceful civilian needs. And it will be barred, absolutely, from nuclear weapons capability. That will be the law of the land, and no president can disregard or tear up a statute. Our nation's policy is reaffirmed in this legislation that all options, including military options, remain available to prevent Iran from attaining nuclear weapons. Second, this bill reaffirms our dedication to countering Iranian terrorism, human rights abuses, and regional aggression by providing a policy that we hope will be joined by Republicans as well as Democrats. And although nuclear-related sanctions are lifted, this bill reaffirms that sanctions with regard to terrorism, ballistic cruise missile proliferation, and human rights abuses remain in place, and it expedites, and I stress expedites, consideration of new terrorism sanctions-related sanctions if necessary. And third, this bill empowers our allies, especially Israel, our major strategic partner in the Middle East, to counter Iran and its terrorist proxies. The Iran Policy Oversight Act enhances Israel's qualitative edge by explicitly authorizing the president to provide Israel with additional military aid, intelligence cooperation, and missile defense code development. All of these steps are consistent with the agreement None require reopening negotiations. Many can lead to additional collaboration with our regional allies and our allies in Europe. And together they help set a strong foundation for continuing steps to crack down on terrorist extremists in the Middle East and around the world and stop a nuclear-armed Iran. And I look forward to supporting those additional steps through Congress as we take them. And now I'd like to call on my colleague, Senator Wyden.
Thank you, and I don't want to turn this into a bouquet tossing contest, but Senator Cardin did a terrific job pulling us together, and suffice it to say, the senators up on this podium all represent the key national security committees, essentially foreign relations, intelligence, armed services. So you see that this is a major statement today that we're making about national security. My view is for this agreement to be successful, there must be zero tolerance for cheating. That success rests on American vigilance and a commitment from our allies to resolutely stand with us against any Iranian violation. Right now, the whole world is watching. So it's unlikely that Iran will engage in major malfeasance in the short term. But as time goes on, there is a bigger and bigger threat of incremental cheating. That is why we have felt there has to be a clear and unambiguous deterrence every step of the way as this agreement goes forward. Senator Coons and I spent a substantial amount of time this summer securing a commitment from the President in writing that our European allies will respond to any effort by Iran to push the limits of the nuclear agreement and in effect test the world's resolve. And it's especially important that the President's letter to me makes clear that our allies stand ready to reimpose European Union sanctions as appropriate should Iran violate the agreement incrementally. The fact is that small violations lead pretty quickly to bigger violations. And what we are doing is saying very clearly that any violation, we expect strong deterrence. The goal, as Senator Cardin said, is to ensure Iran never obtains a nuclear weapon. And if you're going to pull out all the stops to reach that goal, you've got to make sure that cheating is countered at every turn. The fact is there is a long history, a long and sordid history of duplicitous acts by the Iranian regime. So we are going to need every ounce of deterrence at our disposal to hold Iran's leaders to their commitments. And what we felt in the discussions is that the matter of making sure that the Europeans were with us every single step of the way was critical if you really were going to deter cheating. And now we believe we've got that commitment. Finally, the bill is going to, in our view, strengthen the U.S.-Israel alliance by authorizing new security assistance to ensure that Israel has the tools that that great country needs to defend itself from conventional and unconventional threats. And I'll close picking up on what Senator Cardin made mention of, because we're talking to colleagues on both sides of the aisle. The strength of the U.S.-Israel relationship has always been about support on both sides of the aisle. I personally think that provisions in this legislation that we offer today provide a fresh opportunity after this debate, where we did not have bipartisan support, to try to bring senators together. That's why I think this has been such an important effort. Again, big thanks to Senator Cardin. And I can tell you, having talked to him throughout the summer, there is no one in the United States Senate who knows as much about this subject as Senator Coons. I thank him for his good counsel on this matter of zero tolerance for cheating and for all that he has done to build accountability into this agreement. Senator Coons.
Well, thank you, Senator Wyden, and thank you to all of my colleagues who are joining Senator Cardin. Thank you, Senator Cardin, for your leadership in all the hard work you've done to make sure that the Iran Policy Oversight Act of 2015 is introduced today. A wide range of views about the JCPOA is represented by the original co-sponsors of this act, but we are unanimous in our opinion that as we move forward with the implementation of the JCPOA, our factual, thoughtful concerns about this deal can and should be addressed by effective and engaged oversight by Congress. Nothing in this bill, as Senator Bennet said before me, is intended to renegotiate the JCPOA. Nothing in this bill, as you've heard from other senators before me, undermines the nuclear deal. The purpose of this bill is to improve the likelihood of success of the JCPOA. Our bill addresses issues that were not fully resolved in the Iran deal, from reminding Iran that we reserve all options, that the military option remains on the table if they violate this agreement and seek to break out towards a nuclear weapon, to strengthening and sustaining our support for Israel and committing ourselves to enhancing its qualitative military edge, to making sure that there are the resources for the IAEA to conduct thorough inspections, to ensuring that we are briefed on the outcome of the PMD review that's being done by the IAEA now. There is a wide range of provisions that are the result of the collective effort of all the senators before you. And I want to specifically thank Senator Wyden for all those late night calls about exactly how we were going to get to the language that would ensure that marginal cheating, that efforts to lawyer this deal were nipped in the bud up front, and to work together with the administration to ensure that our European allies move forward with us, even as the years go by. Let me just talk for a moment about the situation we find ourselves in. This deal was not disapproved by Congress, but a bipartisan majority disapproved of it. It is clear from the Republican presidential debates that the success of this agreement faces some real headwinds in 2017 and going forward. And so I think we unanimously believe that by strictly enforcing the deal, by holding Iran accountable for any increase in funding or support for terrorism or its proxies in the region, by ensuring that we strengthen Israel's security, and by being insistent that the resources are there for the IAEA, these and other steps we can take together ensure that this deal will be so strongly enforced and implemented in the year ahead that by 2017, the next president should hesitate, should review it, and should reconsider before tearing it up, as many of the candidates currently in the field suggest that they will do. So our challenge is, where do we go from here? Do we allow the important disagreements between senators to be reduced to partisan bickering that will lead nowhere, or do we work together to strengthen this Iran deal? I think that by introducing this bill today, this broad and representative group of Democratic senators chooses the second option, and it is my hope and prayer that we will continue to find partners, not just in our caucus, but across the aisle, that will work with us to ensure that the JCPOA is thoroughly and thoughtfully and effectively implemented. With that, I'd like to turn the podium over to Senator Schumer, who has played such a central role in these conversations.
Thank you. I want to thank all of my colleagues. As was mentioned, everyone had great input. I'm not going to stop the bouquet tossing. He deserves it. But thank everybody for being here. The legislation we're introducing today will strengthen the oversight of the P5+1, strengthen our policy in the Middle East, and help ensure that our ally Israel has the support it needs to head off and protect itself from the threats it faces every single day. The bill accomplishes this by requiring detailed reports on Iran's nuclear research and development activities, as well as estimated nuclear weapon capability and breakout time. The legislation requires reports on Iranian use of funds received as part of sanctions relief. We need to watch those funds like a hawk and ensure they're not going to fund terrorism in the Middle East. The bill authorizes the President to take all necessary and appropriate measures to strengthen Israel's military advantage in the region, effectively deter conventional and nuclear threats from Iran, and counter any non-peaceful nuclear activities by Iran. Simply put, the bill strengthens and enhances our ability to enforce and monitor the P5+1 agreement. It should put the United States in a stronger position to provide support and protection to Israel should Israel need it. It will make for a safer America, a more stable Middle East, and a stronger Israel. It's a common sense bill. It deserves bipartisan support. I hope we can work together to pass it. And with that, let me call on another member of this great group, Senator Warner. He's in the taller end of people.
Thank you, Chuck, and let me thank everybody, particularly again, attaboy Ben. Great job. A few weeks ago, and I think all of us in this group spent an enormous amount of time thinking through this very challenging vote. A few weeks ago, when I announced my support for the JCPOA, I did so believing it was the best available option to make sure that Iran didn't obtain a nuclear weapon. But I said at the same point that there should be opportunities, and I believe this is that opportunity, for Congress to act to strengthen the agreement. So I stand here today, it's been mentioned, with folks who both opposed and supported the JCPOA. And I believe this legislation takes an important step in strengthening that agreement. It holds the Iranian regime responsible for abiding by the terms of the agreement. It puts in place mechanisms to make sure that we keep the pressure on Iran for its other nefarious actions, particularly around terrorism and human rights abuses. It makes sure that the administration notifies Congress if it was to list any additional Iranian sanctions, particularly sanctions that apply to Iranian terrorist activities. And as has been mentioned, it requires the administration to follow the money in terms of where those funds that are being released, particularly if they're released, and go towards nefarious purposes. And as has been mentioned already, it strengthens even further our nation's unwavering commitment for Israel and ensures that Israel will continue to have a qualitative military edge. The JCPOA was just the beginning of, not the end of the process to make sure that Iran doesn't obtain a nuclear weapon. I believe this legislation is the next important step. I urge my colleagues to support it. I'd like to draw upon now our last colleague, Senator Booker from New Jersey.
It's good to play cleanup with such an auspicious group of men. All that's been needed to be said has been said already about this legislation, but I haven't said it. So I will start
So
with.
it hasn't been said.
So it hasn't been said. So first of all, I do want to say I'm grateful for the leadership of Senator Cardin all throughout the process of this bill, but frankly through a long summer, and his willingness to give counsel and collaborate with me on my thoughts on this. This legislation, as has been said, is consistent with the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. This JCPOA is the most effective strategy to limit Iran's nuclear capabilities over the next 10 to 15 years. But what we're doing with this legislation is making these efforts far more robust. We're protecting our ally, Israel, providing more transparency to the activities of the administration and the activities going on in the Middle East. We're making sure that we are doing everything we could and should be doing to deal with the destabilizing activities of Iran in the region, particularly its support of terrorism through proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah. This bill includes measures that will give more insight into the movement of conventional arms in Iran, from Iran and throughout the entire region, and I believe will be a part of a more important, larger package that will emerge that will make sure that we have the full security assistance necessary to Israel. I'm proud to be a part of this group on what is indeed common sense legislation that will make the region safer, more stable, that will offer great protections to Israel, and that will make America safer as well. There is a lot of work to do. I knew when I supported the JCPOA that it was a beginning of a process that necessitated and demanded vigilance, engagement, and a role that America must continue to play. This bill goes to a long way to support those beliefs. Thank you.